When it comes to day 3 of the NFL draft, to me, you've got two types of prospects that you usually want to target. One type are those guys with the great athletic upside, but they're raw, they're unpolished as a player, they're going to take some time, but you're saying if they can play up to the level of their athletic talents, then they will vastly outplay their draft position. Other side of that are the guys that were productive college players that maybe are missing one or two traits that keep them from being a day 1 or early day 2 pick. But you feel like you get them in the right system, the right situation, they could still be productive players for you at the NFL level, and you get value out of those day 3 picks. I feel like Royce Freeman from Oregon kind of fits into that category. He was a guy that was in college, it seems like, forever. And that's what happens with so many running backs, rightfully so. When they get the first glimmer of hope that they could actually declare after their junior seasons, they go because that window of opportunity closes quickly at the running back position, and you want to make sure you can get your money while you can. So it's not every day you see a guy like Royce Freeman, who's a 4-year starter at a major college program, in the college game today. You just don't see a lot of these guys. So it's awkward sometimes, I think, when they actually go into the NFL draft. But looking at Royce Freeman and why I have some thoughts that he could be one of those day 3 type of real value guys, but maybe he's not a day 2 type of guy. Here's what I think of him as a prospect. He's got great size and build for the position. Like, you look at Royce Freeman, he looks like a feature back. He looks like a between-the-tackles thumper. He looks like somebody that should be a real monster. He also runs with physicality, breaks a lot of arm tackles with quite ease. He eats up them arm tackles like a Nick Chubb and a couple other guys in this draft class. He's a really patient runner, allows his blocks to develop in front of him. So, sometimes with those big guys, they're trying to compensate for their lack of quickness, burst speed, by trying to hit the hole as quickly as possible, just because they feel like, I'll just lower my shoulder and I'll get a couple of yards and we'll move on. He doesn't have to do that. He's got the patience to allow the blocking to set up in front of him. He's shown some aptitude and willingness as a pass protector. Again, I talk about it a lot with these guys because NFL teams and coaches and scouts are going to focus on these things. They're not as concerning to me necessarily, but it is a plus more than it is a minus if a guy can't pass protect. It's more of a plus if they can. And Royce Freeman would be able to do that day 1 at the NFL level. He's got enough hands to play on passing downs. He's not going to ever be electric as a receiver. I don't know if he's going to be a guy that you target 60 to 70 times in the passing game, but you can throw it to him a couple of times out in the flat, catch the defense napping, and pick up a couple of first downs and perhaps a big play here or there out of using him that way. And you also got at Oregon, Royce Freeman, the kind of feeling or aura that he was a bit of an alpha dog. And again, that's a good thing. He felt like a lead dog. He felt like a lead back. He felt like a dude that you could trust to put the game in his hands. And he was a guy that other guys were going to respect and other guys were going to follow. That said, he's got a lot of mileage on his body. Since he played at Oregon 4 years and was, for all intents and purposes, the feature back for 4 years, watching him forever, like I said, it feels like he already has over 1,000 touches from college. That's not even factoring high school and the years before that, but just in college alone, he averaged over 250 touches a year. That's a lot of touches even for an NFL starting running back, frankly. And he had 250 of them a season in college when they're playing fewer games. He also had some problems in the past putting the ball on the ground, which is a concern for a big physical runner like him. You're going to get a lot of contact. You're going to be in a lot of tight quarters with multiple guys trying to get in there and get you and then try to strip that football out. He's had a couple of issues with that in the past. He's going to have to be able to run physically between the tackles to be able to succeed in the NFL, and you'll wonder if that's going to be an issue, putting the ball on the ground, which is going to be the quickest way to sit your ass on the pine. And compared to previous years, watching him in 2017, it felt like he lacked burst and speed that I had seen out of him previously. And maybe part of that is watching some other running backs and seeing them being more explosive. Royce Freeman didn't measure up as well, and that could be it. When I watched him in 2017, it just felt like to me he was a step slower. Just all around. A step, maybe a step and a half slower. And he already, to me, wasn't a real burner anyways. He wasn't a super explosive guy. He just slowed down a little bit. And again, I could be wrong, but that's the way I felt, and that's what I saw. His vision is lacking. He does struggle to identify holes. He struggles to identify where his cutback lanes are. So while the patience is really good, and the patience allows him to have the blocking develop, he does have trouble adjusting his eyes laterally to be able to see what's coming. He didn't give me the thought that he had the most peripheral vision either. He's not very shifty. He's not going to make a ton of defenders miss, and that's just the way it is. That's not going to be how he makes his living at the NFL. And you look at guys that are the big kind of physical between the tackles runners, and sometimes those guys can be a dime a dozen, and sometimes those guys just don't translate to the NFL just because they're always having to crash into the line in order to make their big plays happen, and it just doesn't work the same at the NFL level. I look at Royce Freeman, and I kind of feel like he should have just declared last year. That's the real truth. Because for me, he was already a junior with a ton of mileage on him, a ton of film out there to study. I didn't think going back to school as a senior was really going to help his draft stock, and believe me, ultimately it did. I understand maybe the perspective of he really liked college combined with the strength of the 2017 running back class, but the 2018 running back class isn't that far below the 2017 class. And now Royce Freeman has another year of film, another year for people much more qualified than me to pick apart his game. It feels like he possibly, not guaranteed, but possibly cost himself some money by going back to school. I applaud him for doing so, granted, getting the degree and everything, but from a business standpoint, it's not necessarily the best decision to make. And as I referenced a little bit earlier, when I watched Royce Freeman in 2017, I didn't quite see the same running back I had seen in 2015 and 2016. He just didn't look 100% the same. He didn't look like he had that same burst that I thought he had, which made him a much more impressive prospect. It was just weird. And all that said, I still think he could be a quality day 3 pick. My grade on him is a 4th round grade because I frankly feel like he's a 4th round talent. But he is a guy that you could take and gets an opportunity as a rookie, and he might wreck some stuff. He possibly could. He might get some bursts back. And if he does, watch out. In terms of the NFL comparison for him, the lazy comparison that I've seen a lot of is Jonathan Stewart. And I don't buy that one because just because they might be the same height, or so to speak, and they went to the same school, they are different running backs. Jonathan Stewart had more bursts, had more explosiveness, and had an extra 20 to 30 pounds on his frame coming out of Oregon. And at the NFL level, he played at 250, 255, not the 225, 230 Royce Freeman does. So I don't think that's the best comparison. There's a part of me that could have said that Carlos Hyde, when he was coming out of Ohio State, he broke a ton of tackles. But to me, Carlos Hyde had more agility. He had a little bit more shiftiness, quickness, speed. So it's kind of like a combination to me of some Carlos Hyde and maybe some Samaje Perine. And Perine was a guy at Oklahoma. He ran hard. He was an intelligent guy, kind of an alpha dog team leader type. But he didn't have a ton of burst. So the blocking in front of him had to be really, really good in order for him to be able to get open and in the open field. And that wasn't as much of a problem at Oklahoma because, again, you're playing in the Big 12. They ain't defending anybody. It's a no-D league. But you get to the NFL, and you can see Perine has a couple of good games where his line holds up. But when they don't, a lot of times he's just crashing into the back of the line. But Royce Freeman, if he were to come out last year into the draft, I'd probably have a higher grade on him than I do this year. It is one of those things where I fully expect him to be a day 3 pick because teams are familiar with him. They're comfortable with who he is and who he isn't, more so than they are the other guys. So his floor might be higher, but his ceiling isn't quite the roof. You like how I worked MJ into this? If you don't, then eat shit! Royce Freeman, possible day 3 steal.